Awesome.
Welcome to Game Over, everyone. Damian Smith for Game Over Ottawa here today. As the Sens drop their second game in a row, I'm very pleased to be joined by Alex Adams, who is a reporter and writer for Sportsnet, as well as the host of Game Over, or sorry, not Game Over, Behind the Play. Welcome to the show, Alex. It's been a little while. Appreciate you taking
Yeah,
the time.
I know. I missed your face. Last time we
Yeah.
saw each other, we were at a PWHL game, and
Yes.
you obviously both working at the Hockey News. And it's been cool to see you kind of going more the news route and also covering your hometown team, which is kind of cool, like me. So excited to talk about the Sens, although it's been obviously a disappointing season so far and a disappointing result tonight.
Yeah, it has been mostly a disappointing season regardless. I would say out of the past three games on this road trip, this is probably being the Sens' best one. Would you agree with that statement?
Man, maybe by a sliver against
Yeah.
compared to the LA game. Obviously, San Jose will not be part of the equation on this question. I think what I liked about this team, at least tonight, was just their resiliency. Obviously, it's a shootout loss. It's hard to if they had won in a shootout, you think back, oh, they played well, they did everything they needed, but won the game this time. They didn't, of course, in the shootout, but I think just coming back, especially in that third period, Nick Cousins scoring first goal in 14 games. That's something that this team's really lacked. If you look back in their 5 game skid, most of the games are 1 goal losses where they fought back and were kind of so close, but yet so far at the same time. And if we're going to be glass half full, the ability for this team to finally start to garner and gain some points will be necessary. The problem is that you're against the Anaheim Ducks, who've actually been pretty good this season. They're a 500 hockey team. I think they might be 1 game above 500 now, but against a pretty good team, and you don't play very well defensively. I thought they were just eating, kind of oozing chances for Anaheim, really all over the place, throwing pucks around. Even like Claude Giroux, I think in the first period threw a puck, or no, it was in the third period, kind of made a horrible turnover, almost led to a goal. So even like your best players, most defensively responsible players were making mistakes. So um, I think overall this team really needs to get back to what really worked to begin the season which was their defensive structure. And it really feels as though since that maybe that Philadelphia game where they played really well and should have won, their structure's fallen apart, even though Allmark's been playing really well, which is a good sign. And if it wasn't for him, they might have lost this game, 5-3 or 6-3.
Yeah. So, yeah. Yeah. We'll start off with the game here. To the penalty at the start of the game, I believe that was from Gregor in the offensive zone, right? That's just another one of those small little things where you sit there and you got to say, like, you got to be better here, man. He's below the goal line, I believe. It was a slash, from
Yep.
what I can remember. And then the Ducks go back the other way. What did you see on the Vetrano goal? It was a nice shot. I don't think Olmark could have done a whole lot there. When it comes down to the defensive, I'm not honestly. What I have to say about the Sens PK, I don't like their strategy that much. They're not
And
aggressive enough.
see, that's the thing I've been really dubious of. If that's the one thing I'd really critique Green so far, is they've gone to this like zonal diagonal type diamond formation. And just being around the team, and I asked them a lot of the players, especially to begin the season when they were getting used to it, and they were saying like, "Yeah, we feel good about it, but we're still thinking, we're still acclimatizing to it." And that's what you see is like against LA, there's just a huge lane open for Kempe to get a pass from Fiala. On the for Toronto goal, maybe a little bit less of that, but there's just so much space. But the interesting thing when I look at the stats is that I think they have the seventh or eighth best at high danger chances, like limiting high danger chances on the PK.
Hmm.
So the stats almost would say like this team's been pretty good on the PK, but the eye test feels like what you said, Damien, that just their structure allows teams to get in front. Like I think in the second period, I forget who it was, but he just was at the side of the net and just walked in and almost scored an all mark with no defenseman there because they were in that box formation. So I don't really like it. I think they give up too much on the bumper, too much on the sidewall, and it's been hurting them because the team's given up a peak goal on the penalty kill in 5 straight games.
Yeah, and I think they're 24th from last time I checked it. At least they said in the broadcast, which is like straight up not good enough. I think in the past years, like especially in the DJ Smith years, I think they could always get by on the PK. It seemed like, but that was because a lot of the teams were built off of the like there was a lot of their team was revolved around sort of grinders a little bit, right? Guys who were fighting to get by in the NHL. Like a guy like Connor Brown was exceptional in the
Yep.
PK. You look at in the early days, JG Pajot, guys like that. Even Dylan Gambrell, right? Those types of guys were good on the PK. I think the Sens are sort of lacking that though right now, because when you look at the PKers, right? You got Josh Norris and Claude Giroux on your first PK. I don't know about that one, right? Because it's not like they're bad defensively, I don't think, but
No,
ideally, I don't think you want your second line players killing penalties, right?
that's an interesting conundrum. I mean, like you look at the Leafs, like Marner's been great on the PK for years.
Hmm.
I'm more of the view like get your best players out there. They had Tim Stützle playing PK to begin the year a little bit. I probably would have liked that more than maybe Giroux, who's really good at faceoffs, but just and has a really great stick, but is also kind of slow. And I've liked really Noah Gregor on the PK. I think he's maybe been their best PKer so far. But it's definitely an interesting conundrum. Do you play those guys or do you put Ostapchuk or Cousins or I mean those guys aren't necessarily PKers, but that's
Yeah,
maybe
they're
the
not.
problem.
Right? Like Cousins doesn't kill penalties, I don't think. I haven't seen him on a single shit this year. Amadio looks like he's sort of fifth or sixth in the depth chart. I thought he would be killing a little bit more penalties, to be honest, but he's another guy that's not fast. He has, I think, a good stick by all accounts. Has he been stellar this year? No, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But and then that's pretty much it. Like there's Pinto. Ideally, I always thought Pinto would be like their number one PK guy because he was always good in draws in college, and he still is, I think, in the face-off dot. And ideally, on paper, at least your third line center is your number one PKer out there. That's going to hop off the boards and have a lot of
Hmm.
those defensive matchups. And I don't know, like it looks like this coaching staff, maybe it's injury related because Pinto has not had a good start to the season. He just looks a little bit off, and they might have a little bit of a different idea of what Pinto is compared to the last coaching staff.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something that you can kind of see because even I think it was against Calgary, they took Pinto off the second power play unit. I think they did it a little bit at times tonight as well. That's interesting because he has such a good shot, but if he's not, it's kind of like him and Norris, they're not exactly the same type of player. But if they're not scoring, they don't really bring you much else on the offensive end. I think Norris is probably a considerably better playmaker than Pinto is, but if Pinto isn't scoring and he has one goal in I don't know how many games, but 15, 16 games, that just isn't enough, right? And on both sides of the puck, and I think even him, he would tell you, I talked to him last week and he said, I think I need to get back to my defensive prowess. I need to be better, like kind of getting around guys, being better defensively, better stick, and that will lead into my offense. And I thought actually today he played pretty well. He was kind of
Mm-hmm.
caught out of position on the Lacombe goal at the end of the second period. Although I think Jake Sanderson pinching with 10 seconds left,
Yeah.
probably the killer there. But he didn't take his man in front, leading to the goal. So he definitely can get improved. But it's just weird to see players like him, even Giroux, making a bunch of kind of miscues, at least in terms of turnovers. Guys that you don't expect to be turnover prone or maybe poor on the defensive side, really struggling of late.
Yeah, and like we could talk about Brady Kachuk in a sec here, but before that, I just want to talk about the Jackson Lacombe goal. Like 5 seconds left in the period, right? It's like Ullmark makes the great first save, right? And that's what you want from your goaltender, regardless
Yeah.
if he's Jonas Corposalo or if he's prime Carey Price. You want your goalie to make the first save, and it's just after that, like, what is your team going to do around the net to clear the puck? And there's just no one there. Michael Amadio is trailing in behind the play. And it's one of those small things, right? Because if they don't allow that goal, they win the game 3-2, ideally, right?
Mhm.
And it's a free goal for the Ducks to head into the first intermission to have a 2-1 lead and have a lot of the momentum. It's just one of those small little mental lapses that have just plagued this team over the season and throughout the years as well. So like, good thing that Brady came right back the other way in the second period for his second goal of the game with a stretch pass from Chabot on the breakaway, ties it up. Like, Brady has caught some flack this year because of little things, but he has been the furthest thing from the problem. I think he's up to point, what, like 28, 26 on the season. He's
I
well
think
over a point
28.
per game. Yeah. And
Yeah.
he's never been like the biggest scorer or anything when it comes to like points in total. But he has really stepped up, and I have no complaints with his game whatsoever.
I think, like I wrote about it last week, the one complaint, and I think that's what, for the most part, Sens fans would, I think, mostly agree with, is that maybe just don't fight as much, especially when your team's down. And but if you look about like tonight, him and Stutzel were the best players in the ice for the Senators. They were generating chances. They were turning over pucks. They were physical. They were galvanizing their team. They were just unbelievable. And they're not, right now, they're not part of the problem, right? Like, I
Nope.
think, could they be a bit better in their defensive end? Sure. I don't think they've been really lacking. They haven't really led to any goals of late. Kachuk maybe on a couple games ago on their losing streak, but really, for the most part, they've actually cleaned up their defensive game, which was what Sens fans were yearning for with Travis Green.
Hmm.
And Stützle looks like he's a guy on a mission every night, just so skilled, so ferocious and tenacious on the forecheck, creating plays. But once again, you talk about that goal with 5 seconds left. I was trying to collect a bunch of stats tonight during the game because there were so many trend lines that it felt that this game was kind of leading into in terms of giving up goals at bad times. And but if you look at it, this team gives up goals at the beginning of periods and at the end of periods like no other. And even, look to the I think it was the Kings game where I put out the stat. I think 5 or 6 times this year they've given up a goal within 3, 4 minutes after tying the game or taking the lead in the game, right? And that's been their problem, is just giving up those bad goals at the end of a period after they take a lead, after they tie a game. And that's really where the maturity of this team is really
Hmm.
lacking right now.
It is a frustrating thing too, right? Because if you were talking about this team like that 3 seasons ago, the year like where we had Tyler Ennis and Zach Sanford and all these players, right? Before we really started to, put our name out there, um, I would have expected that sort of thing. And now you look at the core, and I know it's not just gonna get better right overnight, right? But you look at the core, like Chabot is gonna be 28 in January in a month. Brady's 25. Norris is 26 or gonna be 26. Like, they're not kids anymore, right? And I know they brought in the vets to help it out a little bit. It just hasn't really worked when it comes to those little things and momentum, right? Because if you're a younger team, you can get overwhelmed, and that's natural because you've had less reps in the league, you've seen less in the NHL, um, and now you're just not seeing the team really come together and like really grind it down. And like you said, they're just allowing goals at the wrong time. Um,
It So
it's
it's almost
tough.
like this. I feel like the story of the season is that this team just finds ways to lose rather than
Yeah.
finds ways to win, and that just, like, in most of the games that they win, it's pretty convincing, right? They're not winning a bunch of tight games, right? And I think if they would have won this game today, it would have been their first comeback victory in the third period after being down, if I'm not mistaken. And that's a testament. I
Hmm.
think they've lost, I think they've won 2 games all year when they've given up the first goal, right? And it's not that you expect you're going to lose most games when you
For
give up
sure.
the first goal, just how it works. But if you're 2-10-2, that's not good enough, right? And then when they score the opening goal, they're like 8-1,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
when the things are good, everything's gravy. But when they fall apart or when they have a bit of uh, need to kind of have some resiliency, show some, they don't really match and rise to it. And I think that's been because of years of really not learning how to play it the right way and winning hockey, and now we're seeing
Hmm.
it back to roost for like the third straight year.
Like there's two sides of the Sens, I feel like, and I'll put this sort of just I'll relate it to the core a little bit. When you look at the top six, like the first power play unit, and then like Shabbat and all these players, what they've seen throughout the years, right? There's if they score first, they're feeling good, they're confident, they're aggressive, they're making the right plays, they're not thinking too much out there. Like you should always be using your brain, of course, but not too much because you kind of want to combine your instinct and your brain at the same time, if that makes sense. And when they allow the first goal, it looks like they're chasing the play and they're not together, like they're not cohesive. They're just sort of chasing the play and thinking twice a little bit on what their next move is going to be. Tonight, like it's a good thing that they sort of, they made a good pushback at least to get a point out of it. But the perimeter play, like I don't feel like they can sort of get towards the net as well as they did at the start of the year. Are you seeing that too? Because the underlying numbers so far this year, I think, have been pretty good. But like puck possession is great and analytics are great. But if you can't get the puck towards the net and get like second chances out there and get towards the goaltender, then you're not going to get those easy garbage goals.
Well, the really interesting thing, if you look at delve behind the underlying metrics, and I asked Travis Green a version of this question that I still don't really know the answer, but I think that's been a trend so far this season is this team's inability to get to like the middle of the ice and generate really high quality chances. If you look at their shots, they're top 10 in the league. If they
Mm-hmm.
look at their Corsi expected goals, even top 5, 10 in the league. But when you kind of dig down, they're right now, according to Natural Stat Trick, I just pulled it up, they're third last in the league in terms of high danger chances this season at 5-on-5, right? And so that really, I feel like that stat combined with the shot attempts and out shooting teams really shows where this team's at, where they have a lot of good possession around the perimeter, but they don't turn it into high danger chances. And I asked Green about it. I was like, do you try to just focus on getting as many shots on net? Because that's a thing in hockey war. It's just like, if things aren't going well, just throw everything at the net. And he kind of said, no, no, like we want good shots. We don't just want a bad shot. And it really feels as though I think of Travis Hamonic, sometimes a defenseman as well, just launching a shot at net. For example, today, thinking of Hamonic, he had the puck in the second period, and Tim Sousa was on the left side, and he just launched the puck at the net. Dossel grabs
Mm-hmm.
an easy save, and it ends a really good cycling play, and Stutz is right there.
Mm-hmm.
And you just had this great momentum of cycling around, and now it dies. So I don't know how you fix that. Like, how do you teach your defensemen to be better? They've only had 3 goals from their defensemen this year. I think that's part of the problem too. Yeah,
Really, eh? And I guess it's all well. There's Jensen has one, Shabbat has one, Sanderson has,
Anderson is one.
and then Clevin now. So yeah, we're up to with it even
Four,
then.
four. Yeah,
Damn, yeah. I guess JBD doesn't have one as well.
no,
Um,
and Hamonic doesn't.
yes, Hamannik. It like all right. I love the guy itself, but it he has played pretty much every game this season, and I don't know where we go with that because the Zub injury is he's coming back in what like 4 to 6 weeks from now. Um,
Mhm.
after probably after the new year at this rate, so it's going to be a little while. I think the Sens are just going to have to make do. Before we wrap up this first segment, throw out your player of the game for the Ottawa Senators here today.
That's a good one. I'd say probably the player of the game has to be Brady Tkachuk. Like,
Hmm.
you can't be, it's him or Allmark in my opinion. And I think just the way Tkachuk galvanized his team, got his team, put him on its back, and led them to at least get a point, I think was really impressive and really shows why like he's not the problem in Ottawa. Could he be better, as Travis Green said? Sure, we all could, including myself. But uh, I think just the way he kind of leads by example, the commitment to, he's such a hard worker. He's super intense. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but he gives a shit.
You can.
Right? Like it's just everything you need, and he showed it tonight, and that's why he was the Sens' best player. And they probably don't get a point if he doesn't show up the way he did tonight.
12 shots for the captain tonight. It's not like the Sens had a ton, like they were in the 30s, but
Would that be like 35% of the Sens shots? They only had like
it's insane.
30 on them.
Yeah,
I'm doing the math right now, but keep.
he's pushing, man. Like, and his interview in the first intermission, it's obvious he's showing frustration and everything. But I just gotta think it's like that's a player who's trying his best, and we could get a little bit more to the bottom six a little bit later. But a lot of those guys don't really seem to be doing a whole lot of stuff right now. And he's not gonna say it, and maybe he is thinking it. I don't know. Um, and it was an interesting interview. I don't know if you saw that one with Gordon Miller when Brady says we need to be better, and Miller just says how, like, please tell me. And it's interesting because coming from the commentator, right? That's something that's a little bit spicy, just to throw out there.
Shout out to Gordon Miller. He's a great guy. But he so just I did the math. He had 38.7% of the Sens shots tonight, Brady Tkachuk. So there you go.
Like you
With
can't
12,
ask
yeah.
for more from him, but then also you got to look at the glass
But I
half.
think that's I think like to go back to maybe Gordon Miller's question, like
Mm-hmm.
how is the million-dollar question? How does this team collectively not have brain farts like Sanderson jumping up and Amadio missing
Mm-hmm.
Lacombe with 5 seconds left, right? How do they get rid of Gregor taking a dumb penalty? Greg took a really dumb penalty. I don't
Again,
even know what
yeah.
that was against LA, just going on the ice when they already had five players and no one was coming to the bench. Just those little things, like it's gonna bite you in the ass, right? And it has so far for this team, and the only way is through them in a sense. And I think if Kachuk can maybe continue to lead by example, and maybe I still think he needs to cut down on the fighting, which he's only done twice. But I think against Vancouver in that game, he lost himself. Outside of that, really no complaints, and hopefully the rest of the pieces step up.
For sure. That wraps up our first segment of the game recap here. The Sens fall 4-3 in the shootout, their first shootout of the game. Before we head into the second segment, where we're going to be talking sort of about two halves of the season. I think when you look at the first, dozen games, the Sens were pretty good by all accounts. Had a decent record, sort of 500, and eventually ever since that Philly game, it really feels like it's fallen off. But before that, I just have to tell you about Hyperdrive Hockey, which is a great show from Max, Kevin, and Daphne. You can check it out on YouTube. 2 episodes per week. They talk all things hockey, whether it be here in the NHL, in Europe, prospects, whatever you think can come to mind. So you can check that out on our YouTube channel, and you can also check out more information on the Game Over Network website. Okay, let's talk about sort of the story of two tales here between two different teams for the Ottawa Senators. Going back to that Philly game, that's where I'm kind of gonna leave it at the cutoff, because that's when the losing streak really started to happen for this team. They lost 5 games, or 4 more after the Philly game, and there hasn't been a ton of games where I've found them and watched them and said, "Oh, they deserved that win," like 100%.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, their last win was definitely the epitome of winning because of the goaltender, not because they played very well. Yeah, I think what was interesting in the first 15 games of the season before the Philly game, they had traded wins and losses. They didn't go on any streaks. They didn't lose. They didn't win two in a row, more than two in a row. They didn't lose more than two in a row. And there were moments against Vegas where they're up 4-3 with 3 minutes left and then lose 5-4 in regulation. I think the Philadelphia game as well, even the Rangers game, where they had moments where they could have, gone to 5-2, gone to 9-7, right? And really solidified them as a team that was at least in the hunt for the playoffs and not so far away. And when they would lose those games, I remember Nick Jensen, and a couple other players, but specifically Jensen saying, what's really hard is like we're playing really well and we just find ways to lose. And we want to keep with that process, but it's really frustrating. And it feels as though after that Philly game, their process got impacted.
Mm-hmm.
Where finally, like they had this game they should have won, that they lost because of Allmark. At least in that game, he's actually been pretty good since.
Yep.
But they lost that game because of their goaltender. They dominated the team, and now they're in their heads. They don't feel as confident. And then you see that in those games against Edmonton, against Carolina, against Vancouver, where their process started to become affected by the fact that they weren't winning, right? And
Mm-hmm.
before, I think for the most part, in the first 15 games, they maybe played one or two bad games against Colorado, maybe against New Jersey, but not like
They weren't that
Montreal.
bad, right?
But
Yeah.
they weren't that bad, right? And then now you really feel as though they're not playing that well. Even tonight, I wouldn't have said that was a great game. They could have won it, sure, but was that as well as they were playing to begin the season? I don't think so, even without Zub at stretches. So
Mm-hmm.
that's where I'm really worried about this team, where it feels as though now that the losses pile up, their play starts to lessen as well, and that's, not a recipe for success.
No, and I feel like once in this stretch, when they've pushed, it's been at the wrong times, right? Like the Vancouver game's the one kind of where a lot of people were freaking out after it, and I kind of get it because I think that was the fifth loss in a row at that point. And I think one thing you've seen with the Sens so many times, and especially over the last 3 seasons, is that they rarely do get blown out, like 6-1, 5-0, that sort of thing. The worst game I can think about this year is probably 4-1 or 5-2 against Edmonton and Montreal, which means they have a good goal differential, right? I think in the standings they're -2, -3 right now. It's not that bad. But they have always failed to get those extra points. And I mean, with the game tonight, you'll take it, right? You get a point after being down, but it's not like they were down 3-0. They were down 1 goal, right? And
Yeah.
I I'm not asking for a lot here as a fan, right? Like you're a professional hockey team, you're going to go down in games, and sometimes you might be really clutch. Like you might have a bunch of dogs out there that are going to muster up points regardless. But as a fan, I'm still asking for a way to muster up some more points.
No, it's interesting. I forget which game it was because it was during their 5 game losing streak, but someone asked Green, I think it was against the Oilers, or I think it was maybe Vegas, but I'm not sure. But
Hmm.
basically, your team is struggling to come back in games. And he kind of talked about how when we get down, our game kind of changes sometimes, and that cannot happen. And I actually think for the most part, it was pretty good when they fell behind. I think their best stretches have been that. And actually, many times this season, that has been their best play. Like
Yeah,
against Vegas, they roared back, lost. Islanders roared back, lost. I'm trying to think, even the
Vancouver.
Canucks.
Yep.
Yeah, right. But that's the problem is your best hockey can't be just whenever you're down and there's no
No.
pressure, right? And then whenever they tie the game, they fall apart like they did
Hmm.
against the Kings, where they give up a goal right after they take the lead, right? Or even tonight, giving up that goal at the end of the first period. Even in a sense against San Jose after surviving, they're up 3-1, and you think, okay, well they survived the first 2 periods. Now they can kind of play a decent third and ease out this game, and then they should have lost that game if it wasn't for Adam Gaudette's beautiful heavenly tip on that suits the pass, right? So overall, this team doesn't really know how to play to the time and score of a game. And I think that's what we're seeing right now. And even tonight, we saw that with that first period. But credit to them for at least coming back 3 times in the game to tie it. But they also need to start scoring the first goal more. They've been
Hmm.
allowing the first goal. I don't have it off the top of my head, but I think 14 of their 23 or 24 games. That's not going to help either, right? So.
And I'm still sort of struggling to see the identity of the squad. Because it seems like there's sort of a mix of players on this team. Like you look at LA, you can sort of see that okay, they're going to play good two-way defensive hockey. And like you look at Danault and Kopitar, Trevor Moore, like all these guys can kill penalties, they can score, and their defense are really tight and they don't make a lot of mistakes. When you look at Anaheim, I think it's more, you know, flashy skill. When you look at Zegras, Zellweger, Minchikov, like all these young players, right? And then with the Sens, it's sort of a mix of both, I think. Like in the bottom six, it looks like they're prioritizing speed a little bit more now. However, they traded Mathieu Joseph, right? So, and
Yeah.
then their offense has stayed the same. I think their offense, at least their top six, has revolved around possession and, making the right plays sort of thing. But sometimes that can kind of bite you in the butt where if you're holding on the puck for too long, and you're on the perimeter, you're not really going to do a whole lot there, right? Do you think there's an identity so far this year? Because I remember at the start of the year they were saying, "Oh yeah, like we want to be hard to play against," but they also said that for their last coach too. So, do you see
Yeah,
any
I mean,
identity so far this year?
that's kind of lip service. Like,
Mm-hmm.
regardless, like every team will say we play hard, we try to be a good 200-foot team. But I thought the identity of this team was gonna be, we'll have better special teams than we did last year where we struggled. They've been half good. They've been a good power play on the power play,
Yeah.
bad on the PK. Have good goaltending, which they really haven't this year. Although Allmark's looking like, if you want to be optimistic, if he starts playing like he has in the last two games, I think they're going to win many more games. The problem is that in those two games, his team in front of him has struggled, and that's the perplexing part. Is as soon as Allmark starts to play well, the team in front of him kind of subsides a little bit in their play. But what is the identity of this team? I think right now, to put it bluntly, is in a sense them trying to figure out how to win, and they don't know how to. And that's not like a stylistic play, is that like they're good on the forecheck or they're, really good on transition. I think right now they don't know what their identity is. And once they start to win and figure it out, I think we'll have a better sense. But in a sense, it's a team that is right now immature and prone to really ghastly mistakes. And it really feels, in a sense, they're just not complete.
No.
And I don't know what that puzzle piece is or what completes the team other than their mental makeup.
And
And into
it's like, sorry to cut you off there, but that's a tough thing to fix. I feel like the mental, like you can't fix that overnight. You can make trades. Uh, like Steve Stais can go out tomorrow. He can trade Josh Norris for like Dylan Cousins or something. I don't know, but
yeah,
I don't know if that's really gonna fix anything, right? Like,
that
cause
that's
you know,
I completely agree because I see people on Twitter, and I mean everyone's allowed an opinion, but it's like we need to make a trade, we need to blow it up. And I'm like, for who? For
yeah. Who are
what?
we getting?
Shabbat, I don't think if you make that trade, I don't really know. Maybe it looks a bit like the Chikrin trade last year,
Hmm.
but I don't know what that looks like. That's hard to trade a guy making $8 million. Same with Josh Norris, who I actually think has been relatively solid this year.
Yep.
Could he be better? Sure, but I don't think he's been the problem. If Shane, like he's producing, he's on he's on pace for close to 30 goals. He's been a decent PKer, pretty decent defensively. I think he's been fine. Um, I think Drake Batherson, maybe in past years, you could say, well, he's a bit of a problem. He's a point per game player, so and I think he's been much better defensively. I wouldn't say he's an ace, but is he a complete liability? I would say probably not.
Nope.
So where you're not trading Stützle, you'd be crazy to trade Kachuk. I think Sanderson's had a really tough year as well. Some of that his own, some of it playing with Hamonic a ton. But he didn't play great with Zub either. So I just don't know, like, you're not trading Allmark.
Hmm.
What do you do? Like maybe like Jensen's been maybe your best defenseman this
He's been
year.
great. Like,
So if you trade him, then you're maybe this team's out of a playoff spot and you think you can't re-sign him. But if you talk about like core players of the team, I don't know where you go
hmm
and what you do. And I think that's the most frustrating part about this team is it feels rudderless in terms of what's wrong with it. It doesn't seem clear outside of mental, and that's hard to quantify. And at the same time, what do you do? How do you rebuild?
Yeah.
All your players are 25 and good.
Hmm.
It's hard to put it all together.
Well, that's why my job is to sit here on this live stream and try to figure out things, but I'm not paid, and you're there to report on things, right? And so
Exactly.
that's why Steve Staios is there, and I hope he can. Like, I'm okay with waiting the situation out. Like, I'm not saying, oh, trade a core player tomorrow, because if you're doing that, you have to make a calculated risk and really like plan out your trade and even just wait till the off season. If we miss the playoffs this year, which it looks like it's going to be happening, I think that you should probably wait until the off season because you're going to have that much more time and there's going to be a lot more options out there. There's going to be a lot more player movement, but that's something we can obviously kick down the road. So yeah, it's a tough conversation because I don't like we've had so many years of losing, right? And you can in the rebuilding years it was easy to say, "Oh, look at this player on the roster right now. He is a liability. He will be off the team in this year or next year, and eventually down the line, the Sens are going to find a good replacement." And they did that, right? Like, I'll give you an example here, right? Like Nikita Zaitsev, right? You sort of replace Zaitsev with Jensen, and that's an upgrade. And the slot has been filled, but then you still find yourself in the same position. So then it's like, was it really an upgrade? Because the record's still the same, right?
Hmm. No, I was looking back at was it 2020? They were 12-12 and some, I think one, or 12-12 and something in 2019, in 2018 season with
Oh, really?
Duchesne and stuff, where they got traded.
Oh,
They
okay.
were 500 to begin the year.
Hmm.
And I'm like, what the heck?
How did
Like,
that happen?
how the heck did that happen? Right? I'll pull it up. I'll double check. But it just,
Hmm.
you think about that and you're like, what?
Well,
Like,
I remember
how?
that season where Shabbat started the year with 22 points in his first 15 games
Yeah.
of the season.
So they were on December 1st, after December 1st, 2018, 2019 of that season. So it was 2018. They were 12-12 and 3.
How? Like that team had like Eric Bergdorfer and like Justin Falk on, with all due
Yeah, I don't think the
respect,
NHL
but
was as deep. I will say that. At the same time, I simply think Duchesne and Stone were great. A young Shabbat, as you said, was great,
mhm.
and Anderson was pretty good. And then like they fell apart at the end when they traded everyone for parts. But um, yeah, that kind of shows you how, in a sense, this team is still pretty bad,
Yeah,
and they shouldn't be.
yeah,
And that, we can go in circles forever, but I think that's just the biggest conundrum. And for Sens fans, they don't deserve it, right? 8 years of not making the playoffs in a league of parity is just really tough, and they haven't really been even close. And hopefully it changes, but it really feels like it's we've seen this before.
yeah. Well, you have a 1 in 2 chance of making the playoffs every year, and like statistically, I don't care whatever players you have on your roster, you have a 1 in 2 chance of making it, and they just haven't. Before we head into the next segment, which you know what is a perfect question for a guy who has been in the locker room this year, for pretty much every home game, right? No road games just yet. But before we head
No.
into that, I just want to tell you all about our Game Over Network, which is an independent production focused on community inclusion and quality people. If you are interested in supporting us, we have crowdfunding options available at the moment. In the description of this episode and all our episodes as well, you can find a link to our Patreon page. We're also working through a page through LaRouche to raise $15,000. So if you'd like to give us any other ideas, please let us know on all our socials and on our website as well. Okay, so now onto our final segment. If anyone has any questions for Alex, please throw them in the chat, and that's something we can talk about in our overtime segment here. But I want to talk about, like you've been in the arena and in the dressing room for every home game, right? So far this year,
Yep.
correct? Okay.
Yep. And practices and everything. Yep.
Yeah, true. And I remember because you got hired by Sportsnet in September.
September.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
September.
So you were
Start of
there for
training camp.
started training camp and everything. And I remember like at the start of this, it's always going to happen in a new season because last season is last season. It's a new day and stuff. And it felt like me just at least consuming all the content from all the Sens creators. It was a little bit better than in past years because they knew they had expectations and they had a new coach this time. That was one big factor.
Yeah.
And there was just good vibes all around. And like we've seen throughout the seasons with the Sens, October is pretty good. It's not bad. They might lose a game, but they're not too down on themselves. Right now, so the last game you would have been in the room was the Calgary game, I guess. So that was a little bit different. Have you seen a change, like in the maybe not the interviews itself, but the way the players like come out of the dressing room to address the media, comparing the start of the season to right now, at least? Like if you look at a guy like Kachuk or Giroux, like do they sound and look different?
Yeah, I think the 5 game losing streak was a perfect example of just how much frustration you could see it. They were wearing it like a jersey.
Mm-hmm.
Those guys, and I mean, even last year when I was in the room for games, you could tell as the season started to slide how much kind of anger, frustration was there, and then it became a bit of apathy, to be honest. And I think that's natural too. I don't want to blame them too. If you're out of the
Mm-hmm.
playoffs and in March and February, the game doesn't matter as much. But I
No.
think you could see with, especially with Kachuk, where he just is wearing it on his sleeve, and I think that's why people love him in this market. At the same time, yeah, you can notice it, and you can notice it when they win, right? Like I remember I think it was they beat St. Louis, and it just felt like this kumbaya moment. Everyone's happy, and then it changes. And I think I tweeted about it maybe a couple weeks ago, but it's like when they were trading wins, like 2 wins, 2 losses for essentially for the first 15 games. It feels like every time they win 2 games, it's like they've climbed the mountaintop, and every time they lose 2 games in a row, it's like it's the sky is falling, right? And I think in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, players wear it like that too, where you win a couple games, you're feeling good. Even the game they when they beat Calgary and snapped the streak, like Reinhardt was really happy. You could just see there was just this like in a sense this relief in the room
Mm-hmm.
because they got it done. You could feel it. And I think now um, heading back to Ottawa for a couple of games, it'll be interesting to see where the mindset and where the feeling of this group is when hopefully they win a couple games, or if they start losing even more and it really goes south.
Yeah. Hmm. Yeah, it's an interesting position to be in. I mean, we've seen this throughout the years where you compare the interviews to training camp and then compare them to 2 months later in November, and it's just basically night and day. And this time around, we're not, around this time last year, this was when around a month after Pierre Dorian got fired, and then a couple weeks before, this was before DJ Smith, right?
Yeah, DJ got fired. I think it was like the 17th or 18th of
Yeah, right before
February.
Christmas.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So, okay. With Brady, right? Like I feel bad for this guy too because he has never been the issue. Like he's never going to be like if you had to rank your forwards, right, 1 through 12, Brady's probably number 2 there because you have Timmy first. So he's not a Sidney Crosby or Connor McDavid, right? And he's your captain. He was never an exceptional scorer growing up. Like he could score quite a bit, but he's simply put just not the issue right now, and it's annoying because you want to see these guys in the playoffs, right? You want to see at least this team get into the final 8, no matter like what type of way it is, whether it's the number 1 seed or the number 8 seed. Even if you're Washington last year with a -40 goal differential, I don't care. Like, just make it anyway. And I don't know, it being in that room right now, I'm just very curious to see what it's like internally with that squad. Like what they're saying to each other after the games, before the games, because it's one thing that you can speak to the media, right? And the fans can, read the quotes and react to them. And a lot of the time, these players are media trained, right? They know what to say after losses, after wins. Some guys will speak more than others. Um, like, I honestly, I don't know where to go with this because do you think that this is really wearing on them at this point? Like, I don't want to say they've checked out, but do you think?
No, I don't think they're checked out. Do I think they're wearing it? Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
I think. And if they weren't, they'd be doing it wrong in a sense. The problem is that every time this team has hit adversity and has been struggling, they don't find ways to get out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Get how they started in 2020. Like, why did they suck in November? Because they have a good October and then things fall apart and they can't kind of ride the ship and change things when everything is hitting you all at once. And that's really the mark of a good team, right? Or at least a playoff team in most respects, is you're going to have lulls in the season. And it's like what Allmark said, you don't lose two in a row, right? You'll lose a game, but you don't make it a habit, right? And they hadn't done that until the game against Philadelphia, where they hadn't lost more than two games in a row. And then they lost those 5 games in a row, right? And
Mm-hmm.
now they've lost two in a row. Now they're playing Detroit, a team that's pretty um, fallible, but at
Yep.
the same time, that's a team you're chasing, and they look really bad, but they have a better record than you because they've
Yeah.
actually found ways to get points. Um, so yeah, I think in the sense it's like every year they have a test, and you need to get a 70 on it. It's not just a 50, and they fail.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what's been the issue with this team. It's little details like Sanderson to begin to end the first period, pinching up when he doesn't need to. If he realizes there's only 10 seconds left, he shades off, and there's probably not a goal, right? But
Mm-hmm.
why are you pinching, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to hate on Jake Sanderson. I think he had a bad game, but he's not been the main issue for this team. Um, but the point is just making dumb mistakes, and you always make mistakes. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's it. It's been interesting with Green. He said that, we all make mistakes. It's just how you learn from them, how you rebound them, how you try to limit them.
Yep.
And I think in a sense, this team over the past, I think, really since the 21-22 season, when there was a little bit of expectations,
Yeah.
uh, and the group was a bit older. Um, they have not learned how to win. They haven't learned how to fix their mistakes. And that's why it's deja vu all over again. And I think that's been the issue is that it's kind of these old habits that creep back all the time.
Yep.
And it's like, I don't know. I'm thinking of something in my psychotherapy field and I'm not going to say
Yeah.
anything, but it's like having a bad habit
Uh-huh.
is really hard to get out of you,
Yeah.
right?
It's deep. Like
And
it's deep in
it's
you,
deep.
right?
Right? And I think that's what we're seeing right now is that they've probably played their best kind of hockey, just quality wise that they've ever played as a team the
Mm-hmm.
past 25 games in the past 7, 8 years.
I could agree with that.
But
Yep.
yeah, but what's kicking them in the butt? Giving up goal. I think they've given up 10 goals this season. They've given up 2 goals in 5 minutes 10 times this year.
Yeah. It's half the
In
games
24.
basically, right?
Yeah,
It's half the
like
game.
that's how you lose, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even if you play a pretty good game,
Mm-hmm.
right?
And
And
it's
they
always the
haven't
small
had
things.
yeah, and they haven't had great goaltending too, but it's turning around for the most part.
Mm-hmm.
But so it's not all on the skaters as well. I think the goaltenders, if they had been a 9-10 save percentage to begin the season and played well, this team's probably like right now 15-11
Oh,
rather
that would be
than
great to have right now.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, just everything's kind of gone
Mm-hmm.
the wrong way. And now it's time to right the ship and they still have a chance, but it's definitely Not every loss gets a bit harder,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, like because they would be at, I think they're at 13 losses now. What? How many more can you take, right? For the next, I guess it would be 55 games of the season around there. You can only muster up 20, maybe, if you want to get like at least in the 90-point range. Uh,
Yeah.
so, yeah, we'll see. This team needs to go on a streak though. They need to go, like they need to find a way. And maybe not even care about how many wins or losses you're having in a row. Think about it for sure, but don't be looking at the standings and stuff like we do all the time. And it's one thing to, like, the coaches, for the players to not get in their own heads and don't hear about the outside noise, but like literally, like, if I was the coaching staff, I would tell them, like, don't do any of that stuff going forward. I'm just one more question here. So yeah, they sent out Linus Ullmark, Nick Cousins, and Brady Tkachuk after the game tonight. Have you seen a trend of some sort with the types of players that they send out after wins or losses? Types of wins. Like, I would assume Brady addresses the media pretty much every game. Giroux
Uh,
probably as
yeah,
well.
I can give some like inside
Hmm.
hockey or baseball. Um, Brady will, as the captain, typically they will be asked to speak to the media the most often. It is not every time. He will not speak to us every time at every game, but I'd say he probably speaks 50%, give or take. I
Hmm.
could be off, but like the most likely person to speak to the media after a game, especially a bad loss or sometimes a great win, is him. Then there's players who are more quotable than others. There just is. So, for example, Nick Cousins, he scored a goal, but he's a pretty good quote, right? More so than, well, I guess Kachuk scored, but let's say Ostapchuk scored. I shouldn't actually use the name. He's not even that bad at quote, but I just mean someone else
Hmm.
scored as well. Um, you might go with Cousins. Allmark is really good. He always gives a quote as well, and he's the goaltender and kind of star. So he's probably leaned on the second most out of anyone outside of Kachuk because he's new. He's the goalie, so important, and he's very um, he's very lively in terms of his comments. But like essentially the protocol is after a game or with the 5, 10 minutes left in a game, the media will kind of talk amongst themselves. There's like a little group chat and they just say, hey, who do we want to talk? And most of the time there's not a huge amount of disagreements. So if Batherson scores 2 goals, he'll probably be asked.
Hmm.
If Sanderson plays great, he'll probably be asked. Or if Allmark it doesn't play his best, he'll probably be asked. So there's no like set rule. Like
Hmm.
it's a kind of open rule, but typically it means a lot of Kachuk because he's the captain, and then players who are more quotable, typically like Zub won't speak to us that much because he's Russian, doesn't his English
Yeah.
isn't great. He's actually very nice. He's always
Hmm.
cordial.
Yes.
I like Zub,
I
but
love Zoop.
yeah, but he's not a we don't go to him too much after games unless he scores a goal or something. So that's
Is
kind of the behind
is
the
there a
scenes.
player you haven't seen so far this year? I'm thinking maybe like a Mario, but I've seen him once or twice, I think.
He's spoken to them. I don't think he's done a post game. Oh, he actually no, he's done post game on the road,
Okay.
but he has. I think he scored. He scored against Toronto, and I think he talked to the media after that game, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay.
Uh, but I can't think of a major player who
Clevin.
hasn't. Clevin.
It seems
He,
like, yeah, the core players are gonna speak regardless, I
yeah.
think.
Oh, Clevin's talked to the media when he scored.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. So I can't think of anyone
Hmm.
doesn't. And typically, everyone will have their day in the sun, I guess.
I'm just trying to think of, like when they send out a player, is there any sort of trend, or whatever player they're sending out, maybe too much a little bit? Because if
Well
you're on a
done.
losing streak.
There is a kind of protocol where let's say the team's at home and Brady Kachuk talks to get to the media on the Wednesday or whatever. Like we ask for him, he talks to us. Typically the protocol is we won't ask for him the next day and sometimes
Hmm.
it'll even impact if he'll talk to us after the game, unless it's very vital. So
Okay.
there's stuff like that where if like Stutza talks to us the day of and then unless he has like a hat trick, he'll probably not talk. But it's again, it's not a written rule.
Hmm.
But there is that trend of like you don't want to be asking for the same player all the time. And that's why I like give credit to Kachuk. He'll never essentially say no to us.
Hmm.
And trust me, that can happen where players say no to doing media. And at least off the top of my head, maybe he has, but he's never really declined to talk to the media after a game, and that says something to him being able to answer questions in the loss.
Yeah, Brady has always he's always been a real one. And it's so hard because you can notice that he cares, and we as fans, like, we might criticize him once in a while, but that is a guy we have just like sucked into the Ottawa community, and he has become a part of it and is a legit captain in the NHL. It is just really tough to see him not have the success because he puts in all the effort and all the work and everything like that. Alex, thank you very much for hopping in on
Of
today.
course.
I'm very happy we could make this work. What can people expect from you going forward for a lot of your articles on Sportsnet and for your podcast as well?
Yeah, no, thanks again for having me on. I'm glad we got this kind of going. We were supposed to do yesterday, and had a bit of a confusing day, so we did it today. So
The big
thanks again.
leagues.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I'll be writing for Sportsnet all year, covering the Senators. I'll be doing some PWHL stuff, but yeah, I'll typically be writing a story after every game. If it's a back-to-back, not always. Like today, like I didn't write off Saturday's game because they were playing today. And so just expect an article kind of after each game about the game, but sometimes just even about where the team's at, kind of bigger picture stuff. And for the podcast, yeah, it's still humming along. Have some cool guests lined up. And I had on Ron McLean recently. I should have Kyle Bukauskas on. I think I can say that. He's great, by the way, and he lives in Ottawa for people
He
that don't
is.
know.
Mhm.
Yeah, and he's doing great stuff on 32 Thoughts. So overall, yeah, check out my podcast, Behind the Play. Always talking hockey and stuff. And yeah, read my stuff at Sportsnet. I always appreciate it. So, and Damien, thanks again for having me on.
Of course, man. Keep sending me those DMs with your articles and everything like that. And because my feed sometimes is a little bit crazy all the time. So,
It's crazy. Yeah, I know. I know the feeling. Yeah.
all right, man. Thanks so much. And thank you, everyone, for tuning in here on Game Over. The Ottawa Senators unfortunately dropped their second game in a row, but we appreciate everyone for just hopping on, whether it's win or loss, because I feel like there's a ton of people out there that just care about this team very much. And I think we can all kind of agree we deserve better. But thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in. And thank you, Alex, once again for joining. And we'll see you in the next game where the Sens return home.